Hey everybody, Jamin here again from Game Show with another weekly thoughts on or vlog. I guess we'll have to think of a title for these. What should we call them? In any case, we're back talking about gamer nastiness, just general people not being very nice. It's a little embarrassing, to be totally honest. So what happened over the past week? Well, there was the big media rollout for Mortal Kombat 10, which I remember playing way back when I was a kid, and obviously is now in its 10th iteration. And the roster was announced, and a lot of information was released about the game. Totally looks cool. I'm sure you might have some strong thoughts about Mortal Kombat. Regardless, Sean Hemrick, the executive producer of Mortal Kombat 10, received a bunch of threats of violence against him and his family on Twitter from one particular account because this character, Reiko, wasn't included in the games. Obviously, I shouldn't have to tell you that, beleaguering the executive producer of a game that you love or have very strong feelings about isn't something that you should be doing, but regardless, here we are. Hemrick actually went out and sort of stated that this is obviously a terrible situation for him, that he's dealt with death threats, etc., against him and his person, but in this case, because they're against his family, it felt altogether different. One of the big problems, and I have an episode about this, is that this is woefully common in the world of games. Phil Fish, for example, who was doxxed, that is like all of his public personal information was released to the public, against the Flappy Bird creator, Dong Nguyen, who also had death threats for the reward for making one of the most successful games of last year, and obviously most notably against BioWare, after a backlash to the Old Republic and then the ending of Mass Effect 3. And that provoked, to some extent, the founders, Ray Mizuka and Greg Zishuk. Sorry, I'm butchering their last names. It actually prompted them to sort of leave the games industry altogether. Obviously, that wasn't the only reason. It seemed like they were ready to go, but it doesn't really help when fans of games that you make are sort of chasing you out of the industry. So a little bit of context here. One, obviously, this is like sort of general internet toxicity. This isn't just a problem with games, it's a problem with the internet writ large. Recently we saw a backlash against female Ghostbusters, backlash against Starbucks for their sort of ham-fisted attempt at that Race Together campaign, and of course George Lucas, who's been a punching bag for quite some time. In fact, there's a piece that I'll link to in the description by Jimi Pagels of Slate, and he says that type in the name of any public figure and death threat is a Google or kill into Twitter, and there's a good chance that you won't be disappointed, except in humanity. And then obviously Jezebel had a huge problem with people posting sexually violent GIFs into their comment section and harassing the writers there. In some of these cases, these are instances in which people have like strong ideological disagreements with the people that they're harassing. But in the more troubling incidents, it's people who say that they have a professed love for a particular thing, and that thing is not rolling out in a particular way. I'll link to another sort of famous passage. Neil Gaiman responded to a fan who was complaining that this person's favorite fantasy author was not producing books fast enough. And Gaiman was very straightforward and says that this person doesn't work for you. Clearly there's an issue, I think, at hand in terms of maybe a sense of entitlement on the part of fans, and that the thing that they love so much should be theirs and theirs alone, or the thing that they love so much should roll out exactly the way that they want it to, not necessarily what a creator's vision is. It's interesting, as I was digging a little bit deeper into why does this stuff happen? I think for one thing, I think games are a little bit different in that I think people do have a very close emotional attachment to games because, as I've mentioned in the past, games are the only medium in which we use the first person. We say, I did this or I did that. And I think that level of embodiment invites a very strong emotional reaction whenever things don't play out a certain way. I think games also are a medium that have come of age in the era of the internet, I think are still working through a lot of different growing pains. But there's this study of something called toxic disinhibition. It was first theorized by psychologist John Suler, who was studying toxic behavior over CB radio in the 70s. CB radio is it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's the original internet, but has a lot of the same qualities. People basically would have these CB radio sets, and you have call signs. You can communicate with other people all around the country, and it's kind of like a really early chat room or something like that. But he studied this process, and one of the things that he found was that the fact that there was this level of anonymity invited people to behave in a particular way. One of his great quotes was that the sleep of reason brings forth monsters. That's a Goya quote, by the way. And the anonymity of CB encourages the monsters to emerge, he said. So clearly there's something about the anonymous nature combined with sort of games, the hopeful twilight of adolescence that's merged into this kind of terrible situation where people are really harassing folks who make games, and it makes them want to leave altogether. The solutions are in some ways kind of straightforward. Again, I outlined a lot of them in my particular episode, one of which was don't be a jerk, right? Like, just don't be a jerk to other people. That should be pretty straightforward. Don't say anything, and I say this to people in the comments, don't say anything, don't write anything online that you would never say to someone in person. And I think the second thing is that we should understand that, like, how hurtful this stuff ultimately is, not just in a moral sense, but in the sense that, like, you're ultimately creating detriments to the thing that you love. Jeffrey Lynn at Riot Games, who's their social systems designer, I've talked about a lot. He says that the more toxicity players experience, they're 3 times more likely to quit entirely. And eventually you just end up with a community of people who are hateful and whatnot. And I don't think anybody wants that. I don't know. So maybe maybe it would be a great idea to stop causing these people who create things that we love so much trouble. I don't know. It's really troubling though. So yeah, it's hard to say whether this is something that will be sort of solved or lessened over time, or whether this is just sort of a permanent state of affairs. I hope it's the former. Anyway, let me know what you think. Hash it out in the comments, and obviously be nice to each other. I'll see you all next week.